What you're about to hear is true. It's part of an active and ongoing federal investigation. If you have tips or information, reach out to your local FBI field office or go to tips.fbi.gov. The following episode contains material that isn't suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
You said that you were following this story while you were in New Orleans. What did you think of it?
You asked about the money. That's why I mentioned that I was following the story. That's how the $30,000 idea came up. I always knew that I was going to put something about money in the ransom note, partly because I was curious to see what would happen.
Wasn't that risky to ask for money on a debit card?
I didn't think so.
You didn't think you would get traced from your ATM transactions?
No.
Think about those moments in your life that, in retrospect, were a fork in the road. What if you did this instead of that? How would your life have turned out? Israel Keyes' decision to chase a ransom is one of those big moments in this story.
What if he didn't get inspired to do that?
What if he didn't chase that extra hit of adrenaline?
What if he stuck to his well-established way of operating and just lay low? If he did, it's tough to see how police would have ever found him or Samantha Koenig.
But Israel chose a different path, one that leads him directly into handcuffs.
He's now unmasked.
You got your monster.
And he's ready to talk. For a price.
We're all wired differently. Some of us are wired for good, some of us are wired for bad. But a select few step outside all of society's boundaries. From cold open media, this is Deviant. Part 4. Welcome back. We're chasing the truth into the dark corners of what humans are capable of. I'm Andrew Iden.
And I'm Dan Semitovich. Thank you for joining us again. We appreciate your support and we appreciate you listening. If you haven't already, please hit the follow button so you'll never miss an episode. And if you're in the follow mood, also follow us on social. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at deviant.podcast. And also, check out our Patreon. It costs nothing to join, and you'll immediately get access to bonus material and an invite to our Discord where you can chat with me and Andrew. We're also posting all sorts of things related to the stories we're telling, and we're updating them all the time. For example, if you go there now and sign up, you can watch some of the police cam video that we talked about in the last episode of Israel Keyes being pulled over and eventually arrested. Go to patreon.com/deviantpodcast and see what's there for you.
This is episode 4 of Deviant. In this series, we're exploring the life and crimes of serial killer Israel Keyes. We want to find some kind of answer to the question, just how far did he actually go? To do that, we need to understand how far we know he actually went. In our last episode, we, at least in part, heard what happened to Samantha Koenig, the 18-year-old animal lover who was abducted by Israel Keyes from the Common Ground coffee kiosk in Anchorage, Alaska. A multi-agency manhunt finally catches up with him after tracking his use of Samantha's ATM card. This is the end of Samantha's story, and for authorities, the beginning of Israel's.
It's March of 2012, and Israel Keyes is now in custody in Texas. Police back in Alaska are still searching for Samantha Koenig, and while she's still missing, investigators, they have their suspect. In Alaska, Anchorage Police Detective Jeff Bell is watching all this unfold. There's a brand new name glowing brightly on their radar, and there's work to be done.
I was assigned still with the task force and the APD SWAT team. And so what my role at that point became going to Israel Keyes' house. That's the first time we had heard his name in the investigation. So myself and other members of our SWAT team put a team together to go make contact at that house. We knew that there was a white truck involved. And so when we got to his house, I walked actually down his driveway up towards the front door and obviously saw the white truck. And ultimately, our detectives served a search warrant at the house and looking for evidence and or Samantha.
What was the optimism at this point that Samantha was still alive?
I think it had diminished considerably. And that evening, I was told probably about 7 or 8 o'clock at night that I was going to be flying out at 10 to Texas with Detective Monique Dahl to attempt to do an interview with Israel down in Texas. And so we flew out that night, got to Texas the next morning, then had to drive to the location where Israel was at.
So you walk into the room, and what's your first impression?
I got a vibe from him that was very, very powerful and scary, and that makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. Eyes kind of just go right through you. He seemed like a big man. He isn't really that big, but he seemed like a powerful person. And we sat down and told him who we were, tried to have just a normal conversation with him. He was open about a few things. Obviously didn't deny having the debit card or anything like that. He had just a crazy, stupid story about how the debit card came in his hands. He told us that he parked his truck at a grocery store in Alaska and left the window down an inch or so. And when he came back out from the grocery store, it was sitting on the seat. So somebody must have slid it through the opening on the door with a PIN number scratched in it. He kind of figured that might have been a previous client of his that owed him money and was giving him access to that to, pay the debt.
So your bullshit meter's going off immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just a crazy story.
Do you think he was panicking?
I don't think so. I think that he knew he was busted for the ATM card and the federal charges for transporting it across state lines and using it out of the state. But I don't think at that point he was too worried about the Samantha Koenig.
Keyes is brought back to Anchorage, where he finally meets the team of investigators and attorneys tasked with untangling all of this.
One of them is FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin. We met her back in the first episode.
When we got that initial call from the Texas Rangers, it was certainly a huge sigh of relief that we probably have the person that was responsible for taking Samantha. But that's really when the work starts, because now it's like, who the heck is this guy? He was an unknown to everyone. And so that's when things really started ramping up in terms of diving into his life and everything about him.
We're going to go ahead and dial up a few other people who are working with us.
Over the course of 2 days, on March 30th and April 1st, Israel Keyes sits and tells the FBI, the Anchorage Police Department, and the U.S. attorneys that he's been operating as two different people for 14 years.
Hello.
Okay. Can you put that on mute?
Done.
Thanks.
He said he has more stories to tell, and he's ready to make a confession.
You told us that you killed Samantha Koenig, is that right? Yes. And then you told us that there were some other things that you'd like to tell us about that.
You're going to get the abridged version. I'm going to leave out some stuff. There's too many people in here. So some of the stuff is very personal. I don't feel comfortable with telling it to a lot of people. Like what I was thinking or what was said between her and I, that stuff stays with me unless there's fewer people in this room.
Authorities don't seem to be buying it at this point. And as far as we can tell, nobody leaves the room. Detective Jeff Bell is there too.
Now keep in mind, he's a detective. He's got years of experience dealing with some of society's worst. But even for him, Keyes is different.
I was there for the Samantha Koenig confession. I can tell you that it's it's the most detailed confession to any crime, complete details. We were essentially asking, did you kill Samantha and where's she at? But we got much more than that. I mean, we got every single detail, the blow by blow, so to speak, of him taking her and what he did to her and where she was. And not only that, the physical reaction that he was having in telling us those details was visible. We could see goosebumps, and he kept rubbing his arms and the hair standing up on his arms. He was maybe reliving it. I don't know what was happening to him, but it was very disturbing actually to watch.
A little bit of transparency here. The sound you're about to hear is from those first two major interrogations. Again, they happened on March 30th and April 1st, 2012. We originally asked authorities for all the interviews available, and they gave us some, but not all. But recently, some of those recordings they didn't release made their way onto the internet like most things do. We cross-referenced those with FBI documents and pieces of audio that we heard before that were in those tapes. So yeah, we're very confident they're the real deal.
Israel's confession of Samantha's abduction and murder happens here, and these recordings are important. For the first time, someone beyond Israel and his victims will know what he's done. For clarity's sake, we're combining these two recorded sessions across 3 days to find out what Israel actually did to Samantha. In addition to Keyes, you'll hear another room full of agencies. Detective Bell and Detective Monique Dahl from the Anchorage Police Department, FBI agent Steve Payne, and federal prosecutors Frank Russo and Kevin Feldis.
When did you first meet Samantha Koenig?
Never met her. Never even seen her before.
So why did you go to the Common Grounds coffee shop on that night at that time?
Because they were open late.
What was your plan when you went there on February 1st?
My plan was exactly what I did. But I was playing it by ear, but kind of lost self-control. Honestly, it was kind of like a spur-of-the-moment thing, the way it happened. When I robbed her, she was very cooperative, and I don't know, I guess you could say against my judgment, I just kept going with it, even though I had already told myself that if whoever was there didn't have a car, then I wasn't going to do anything more than rob them and tie them up. Mm-hmm. But there was something about her, like the way she reacted, that kind of made me want to just keep going with it. Like I said, I had my police scanner in my ear, and it seems like there was something going on the east side, so I knew most of the police would be over there, and I was just on a real adrenaline rush. I thought I could just walk her right down the street, and I had never done anything that brazen before, and I thought, yeah, it was just a real adrenaline rush, and was determined at that point that it was going to happen, regardless of what I had to do. Just decided to take her with me.
What were you thinking at that time?
What, about taking her with me?
Yeah.
I left her. We're scheduled to go on a cruise the next day. In a few hours, yeah. That was kind of part of the idea. I knew that there were cameras everywhere. Mm-hmm. And like I say, if I hadn't been picked up in Texas with all that stuff on me, I'm pretty sure that we wouldn't be talking ever about this.
I saw in the video, before you got in your truck over there in the parking lot, you were both standing on one side of the car for quite some time. What was that?
Oh, you have that on video?
Yep.
Yeah, there were people standing right in front of my truck. Like, standing right there. I kind of had her pinned against the door, and like I say, there were people. I had the 22. I think she knew right then that I was serious, because I told her, I said, I don't want to hurt you, but this 22 is loaded, so don't make me do it. After that, she didn't try anything else, really. I helped her into the truck, and I put the seatbelt around her. And I told her we were going to drive somewhere and talk about what was going to happen. Still had my scanner on, so I knew everything that was going on.
As Israel mentions, he has an earpiece tuned into a police scanner. There's something going on across town, so he thinks that the likelihood of running into cops is pretty low. Then he stops at a red light.
Pulled up to the light at Denali and Northern Lights, and there were two cop cars that pulled up right alongside of us. I know she saw them, but I had the gun like, the whole time. And she didn't do anything.
The light turns green. Keys and the Anchorage police cars go their separate ways. Look, Dan, you and I disagree on a lot of things, right?
But we also agree on a lot of things. You like baseball.
Right. We like a good whiskey.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Oh, God, I hope not.
But also, I think one of the things we both can agree on is that we love Quince. Look, there's a million places where you can get things on the internet.
Yes.
I mean, it's an endless black hole. But if you go to Quince, that endless black hole may stop. Because when I started shopping at Quince, I found some things I was like, this is exactly what I need. For instance, I just told my wife the other day, I said, we need a new chef's knife. I'm sifting through Quince, and I'm going through the clothes and the luggage, and I was like, wait, there's a great 8-inch chef's knife. And sure enough, I bought one, and it's fantastic.
And I was thinking that I need a new bag for taking Gnocchi on walks. Gnocchi is our Great Dane. He's 150 pounds of pure sweetness. He's a little bit of a neighborhood celebrity. Anyway, when you walk a Great Dane, you need a lot of supplies. And sort of sling bag that I was using for him, a little chintzy. I prefer something higher quality, higher fashion. And I was like, maybe Quince has that. And that's when I ended up picking up the Revive nylon fold-over crossbody bag. And now I have all the space I need, and it looks great. And the best part about it is that it didn't cost me a lot. I was willing to pay more, but all Quince items are really priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd expect to pay for similar brands.
go to Quince. You're going to find something that you want or something you need, like I did. And you can go to quince.com/deviant for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/deviant to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/deviant. After stopping at a park to smoke, Israel learns that Samantha's personal items, including her keys and phone, are still at the coffee kiosk.
With Samantha still in the truck, he goes back to Common Ground, breaks in again, and gets the rest of her stuff. Now, he has her phone.
Yeah, so as soon as I got her phone, I started sending text messages.
And that was another question I had. Why did you respond to the text messages? One from her boss and one from her boyfriend.
To make it seem more believable.
Like she was okay and she was mad
Just
at
that
him.
she was, yeah,
Right.
had a bad day and was pissed off at everybody.
Right.
Plus, I figured from her age, that wouldn't be that unusual, or certainly wouldn't be something the police would be interested in hearing about. So I figured even if they were upset about it or out of character, there wasn't anything that was going to be done by much of anybody, at least not for a couple days.
So after that, where did you take Samantha?
I think that was the last thing I did before I went to my house. Parked in the driveway, same place I always do. I just told her to chill out in the truck. So I have some stuff to do.
You say chill out in the truck. I mean, she was tied down to the truck.
Yeah. But I mean, we were in the driveway and there were still people around, so I think I told her, don't try and sit up, don't say anything, just chill out back here and be quiet, and I'll talk to you in a minute. There's some stuff I gotta do.
Keys goes inside his house to see if his girlfriend is still awake. She is, but she's getting ready for bed. He then walks to the shed in his backyard and completes the preparations for what he has in his mind.
I already had an extension cord running out to the shed. The shed was already set up. I had 2 heaters going in there, and I had a big tarp, like a 9x12 tarp, laid out on the floor. I guess it was probably between 1 and 2 that I finally got the nerve to get her out of the truck and walk her over into the... I had her blindfolded then, because, I was telling her, don't try anything. I'm going to put you out here and make you comfortable. You just sit here and chill out. And I've got some stuff to do. I've got some running around town to do to get all this stuff put together and worked out. But I'm going to have my police scanner on me, so if I hear reports of screaming from this neighborhood or any disturbance from over here, I'm going to get back here before the cops get here. And I had a piece of rope it was around her neck, and I had it screwed to the wall. And that's how I held her there, so she couldn't move.
Was she cooperative with you throughout this, while you were doing this?
Yeah. No, the whole time I told her that I made it sound like it was going to be a quick exchange as far as a ransom of some kind, and that was the impression she was under.
So if she did what you told her to, it was her impression that, you would eventually let her go.
That's what she was saying. I never actually told her that.
Israel has one more thing to do before he focuses on his true purpose here. He wants her ATM card.
She gave me her home address, and I went down and I pulled it up on MapQuest and printed out a map of the street she said she lived on, and took it out there and had her show me exactly where her truck was parked.
This is when he drives to Samantha's house and starts digging through her truck. This is also when Samantha's boyfriend walks out and catches Israel in the act. You heard her boyfriend's side of it in the last episode.
So I was just standing there waiting to see what he would do, but I had a knife. He just turned around and ran back in the house. So I just ran down the street.
He drives back to his house and checks to see if his girlfriend is now asleep. She is. Keys returns to the shed where Samantha's being held.
I got a glass of wine and got her some water, and she was asking me if everything was working out okay, and if I had got a hold of her dad, and if I had the ATM card, and if, just asking if all this stuff was going as planned, and I said, yeah, it's fine, and unscrewed the rope from the wall and cut the ties off of her hands, not the cable ties on her wrist, but the tie between them. And had her lay down on the floor on the mat and took 2 more pieces of rope and put them through the cable ties. And
On her hands, so her hands.
yeah, 2 separate pieces of rope on her hands.
Did she ever struggle through any of this? Or did she just let you do that?
She knew. She knew at that point.
Oftentimes in the process of telling this story and making this show, we've referred to the Israel Keys case as a horror film. But honestly, that comparison minimizes the reality. What he did is very real. It happened to very real people. And this is now happening to Samantha Koenig. Inside that shed, with his girlfriend and his child sleeping in the house nearby, Keys is a very real, living, breathing monster.
In very, very graphic detail, he describes how he sexually assaults Samantha before choking her to death. He wraps her body in that tarp, turns off the heaters, and leaves her there to freeze in the Alaska winter. He gets in a cab with his girlfriend and daughter, heads to the airport, and boards the flight that will bring him to that cruise ship leaving out of New Orleans.
When he comes back a couple of weeks later, he moves into the next stage of his plan, the ransom gambit. He goes dumpster diving to find a newspaper from a week or so back that's dated February 13th, a date on which he wasn't in Alaska.
Then he goes back to his shed and thaws out Samantha's remains so he can take the picture of her with the newspaper that he includes with that ransom note, his proof of life.
Remember in the last episode when Detective Bell said that there was some debate about whether or not she was alive in that photo? We know now that Bell was right. She wasn't.
It takes Keys some doing to make her look believably alive.
But I know it took me all night to do it.
To do what?
To get the makeup done. Yeah, a lot of work to do. And like every part you see in that picture has foundation on it 2 or 3 different times. I mean, she was still in good shape, but she definitely didn't look alive. So yeah, it took me a long time. I think I used like 2 or 3 tubes of foundation, and then after that I had to go over it with a couple other colors in different areas. Because, I mean, at first it just looked like she was painted. I had to add in some red and, I don't know, different stuff, different places. It was hard to take the picture because the Polaroid I had only gives a printout of about 2 by 2.5 inches or something. And so I think I took about 5 or 6 pictures before I finally had one that only showed what I wanted.
You know most of the rest of this story already. Keys posts the ransom note. Samantha's father deposits the money. Police track the ATM card's use from Alaska to Arizona to Mexico to Texas. They capture Israel Keys.
Police now know Samantha is gone. The only thing left is to find her. Israel gives that up too. He talks about how after he took the ransom photos, he cuts up her remains and disposes of her over several days in a hole he creates in a frozen lake.
I had my sled, chainsaw with me, at about 80 pounds of lead weights. Cleared off an area in the ice, probably about 8 by 8 feet. Cut a hole. And
So that was the first day. You came back, you think once or twice more?
Twice more.
Twice more?
First day was the head, legs, and the arms.
Of Samantha Koenig?
Yep.
Keys tells investigators where to find Samantha. Detective Jeff Bell is ready.
He asked us for a laptop computer, and we pulled up Google Maps of the Matsu Valley, which is north of Anchorage. And he put a cursor on the lake, the Matsu Lake, and said,
No, that's it right there.
That's it?
Right where the hand is, right there.
Right where that hand is.
If you right click on that, and if it gives you latitude, longitude, you'll see. You go out there, you'll see.
and so I took the latitude and longitude coordinates of that cursor and wrote them down. And then after that interview, I drove out to that location, took my cell phone, walked to those coordinates, got down on my knees to see what I could see, because there was a couple feet of snow on the ground. And I was able to see like one bump in the snow that looked odd, 20, 30 feet from where I was at. And I went over there and brushed the snow away, and it was a perfectly cut cube of ice. So I cleared some more snow around that, and I could see then About a 13 or 14 inch by 20 inch rectangle that had been cut out of the ice. Our SWAT guys, again, our same team, our chief had a fishing hut and they got some fishing poles, drilled a hole in the ice somewhere nearby, and they pretended like they were ice fishers 24 hours a day for 3 days until the dive team got up there.
The FBI's elite underwater search and evidence response team is called in from the lower 48. They reopen the hole that Israel had made, widen it, and go into the water.
Were you there on scene when she was recovered?
I was part of pulling her up out of the water, yes.
In whatever detail you're comfortable with, can you tell us about that experience?
I think mainly that I was up there because I was one of the co-investigators. The U.S. attorneys wanted visual confirmation that it was actually her before we did a press release that it was her. And so I was there to visually inspect the remains to see if I could identify them as Samantha's.
Were you able to?
Yes, I relayed back to the U.S. attorney that it was Samantha. That was probably one of the most actually, the drive from the lake back home was probably the most emotional time I've had during the investigation, because I actually had called my wife at the time, and I was relaying to her, and my son was on the phone too, that we found her. She wasn't alive, but we found her. And, so there was some satisfaction in at least finding her remains, but at the same time, she was deceased. And so that was a hard conversation. And I know that was a tough moment for me.
Now that Samantha's been recovered and everything appears to have happened exactly as Israel said it did, this part of the mystery is over. It's time for a new phase of Israel's story to begin. This phase is full of wild and compounding mysteries that unfold over many years and thousands of miles. At this point, all police have to go on are some initial hints from Israel and a computer. It was seized from his house, and it contains a history of interesting searches for stories about missing people. Lots of them. And they're all over the map.
I think we got the vibe pretty early on with the detail in which he was able to take Samantha and get away with it. And frankly, had he not had the scheme of using the debit card, I'm confident we would not have found Samantha and we would not have solved that crime. I don't think we would have found her in that lake under any circumstances. And so I think that we all felt like she wasn't the only victim and that there were more.
FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin.
It was pretty apparent at that point, pretty quickly into that interview, that we were not dealing with somebody that had just committed one homicide. We were pretty confident at that point that there was more to it.
From that early interrogation on March 30th, 2012, Keyes makes it clear that Samantha's murder is only the beginning of his story.
I have lots more stories to tell if you're interested. I don't know if I want to tell any more stories today, but I have a lot more stories to tell.
Israel's quickly coming to terms with how things are now. He knows that as long as he has information about other crimes, he has leverage. Almost immediately, he begins setting the rules of the game and trying to seize control of his narrative. Pay close attention here. What you're going to hear right now will become a familiar tactic of his.
My concern right now is for what we talked about before I started saying anything. I would rather not see my name attached to dismembered body found in the lake, believed to be Israel Keyes believed to be responsible. I don't want to see that yet. I don't know, call me crazy. I got to get used to the idea that everybody's going to know that I'm not who they thought I was. I got to get used to that.
This is also when the people on the other side of the table begin to diverge on how to handle all of this. Fractures form between law enforcement officials and federal prosecutors, led by U.S. Attorney Kevin Feldis. Over the next several months, they'll all take their turns in the room with Keyes. In many ways, this is an unusual way to handle an interrogation, and over time, this causes a lot of friction and, in some cases, bad blood. We'll hear more about that down the road.
But, as we know by now, there wasn't much that was typical about Israel Keyes. The important thing to know is that at this point, everyone is still trying to wrap their brains around this guy. And Israel, he knows that he has information that investigators need, and he's not talking for free.
What's your goal here? To keep stuff from us or to help us move forward?
I want to help you, but only if there's something in it for me. I don't feel any moral sense of obligation to tell you anything.
He makes his goals known early. He wants to be put to death by the federal government, and he wants to control the media narrative in order to protect his daughter. U.S. Attorney Kevin Feldis is leading the legal efforts here. He strikes a deal with Israel and his lawyers that sets the table for everything to come. As far as the Justice Department is concerned, this is how things need to work.
That's what the order here says. I want you to see that. The Chief Judge has signed it. So today, the ground rules are we won't talk about Samantha Koenig or anything related to her, okay? You can talk to us about other crimes, and we can negotiate with you right here and now about other crimes.
But you can only negotiate independent from that case.
Independent from that case. If there's another case out there, we can talk to you about it before you're charged. We can negotiate what you're charged. We can negotiate everything from sentencing. These are things we may be able to help you with now. I can't tell you what that negotiation could look like until I know, what we're talking about. But I have an idea, of course, that there are other crimes out there. And here's the thing, Israel, you can control those things now.
Controlling things is exactly what Israel wants. His game is beginning now, and he's adapting as he learns.
And there's other things I can give you, but again, that's going to be part of the negotiation, if you will.
Here's Jolene Godin, FBI.
The first few interviews, this was obviously all new to him, interacting with law enforcement. And I think law enforcement had the upper hand initially with him. And then as time went on, he really had the upper hand. He had all the cards, and he knew that. And I think early on, his goal was to get the death penalty and get it as quickly as he could get it. That's what he wanted. And so he was trying to give us everything to make that happen. When he realized that that was not how the system works, I think that's when we kind of saw a shift with him where he tried to definitely take more control of the interviews. And I say that we certainly controlled the interviews, but he had all the cards and he knew that. And so it really became kind of a chess match at that point.
Back in the room with Keyes and Feldis, the contours of that chess match take shape.
And I'm telling you as the prosecutor, we can negotiate about other things. It's not something that we can control forever. I think we both know what's going to happen is that as investigators throughout the country start to look into things, if they find things, if they find a body, they've got to do what they've got to do, and we lose control.
They won't find enough.
I don't know. I don't know that. I'm not bluffing you.
I'm telling you, they're going to find things, but they're not going to find enough. That's why I said a few words out of my mouth can save them hundreds, if not thousands of hours investigating.
And I want to allow you to control that.
The reason I'm doing this is because I always knew that I was playing for keeps, and I knew this was inevitable. I mean, what's going to happen is going to happen. I accept that, and I'm ready for it. I'm more than ready for it. My issue is how long it's taking, and how long it could take if we don't figure out a way to expedite things.
The computer that investigators recovered from his house continues to be a source of possibility in uncovering new crimes.
Here's the deal. I know what you have because I know you have the computer.
Right, and I've got maps. I'm never going to bluff you, Israel, okay? I've got maps that I know come up with a bunch of other states, okay? I've got Washington, Texas, Utah, Montana. I could list them out for you. I didn't bring them all here today.
I know. Like I say, I know what's on that computer. Okay. I know what you have. I know as time goes by, the longer I'm in the system, the longer the investigation goes on, right. You're going to keep finding things. You're going to start to connect dots. I'm only going to give you the dots that I know you're going to eventually connect. Basically what's on that computer. Frankly, if I hadn't been picked up in Texas, that computer would be in the landfill right now.
I get it.
But I'm not going to talk about those things that I know you're eventually going to connect me to unless I know that I'm going to get what I want. And I don't know if that's possible.
Tell me what you want.
I want an execution date.
Israel knows that he needs to give investigators something to move the ball forward.
Hypothetically, I give you a body or two bodies.
Mm-hmm.
You are saying you can move forward, you can give me things, but how can you possibly move forward unless I'm indicted on those charges?
As you may have guessed, he's preparing here to give up the murders of Bill and Lorraine Courier, the story you heard back in our first episode. You know how that goes. He confesses to those crimes while dangling new and undiscovered murders.
And in the next episode of Deviant, we explore Israel's life before he murdered Samantha Koenig. Those years of drifting, traveling, living, and killing.
And in that interrogation room, investigators begin exploring all of that too,
getting a grasp on how far and deep these crimes may go, and how many more victims may still be out there.
There's only 2 federal districts there, Eastern and Western. So Eastern is more like Tacoma and Yakima. Western is Seattle.
So you're saying there's two districts
in Washington.
Federal districts?
Yeah.
You're going to need both districts.
Until next time, thanks for listening. And if you're not already, make sure to follow Deviant wherever you get your podcasts. That way, you'll never miss an episode. Deviant is written, produced, and executive produced by Clark Goldband, Andrew Iden, and me, Dan Simitovich. Original scoring comes from our friend Shuvo Sur, and editorial and production consultation from Jenny Ament. Sales, marketing, and distribution comes from our friends at Gemini 13. Deviant is a production of Cold Open Media.